Aloha and welcome back to Talk Story with House Majority. My name is Della Belatti and I have here as my special guest, Chair Mark Nakashima, and my very special guest, Dr. Noe Noe Wong-Wilson, who is the Executive Director of Lala Kea Foundation, a Native Hawaiian cultural nonprofit. And you have over 10 years of experience at UH Hawaii Community College.
Correct.
Okay. So let me frame this a little bit. You know, this was a historic session for Native Hawaiians. This morning, the governor signed into law House Bill 2511 that makes a significant $600 million investment in the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. But another story of this session has been about the Mauna Kea Working Group and House Resolution 33, which resulted in House Bill 2024, and now we have a new authority or Mauna Kea agency. So take me through the story, because you folks are kind of the key players in the Mauna Kea Working Group. In 2019, there was conflict on the Mauna.
Mm-hmm.
There was protesting, and in 2020, occupation and a lot of turmoil and strife. In 2021, House Resolution 33 gets introduced by Speaker Scott Saiki. Many of us in the House had hints of maybe what he would want to do, and Mark, you can talk about it. Did you know about this? Did you know about House Resolution 33 as it was being dropped?
Yes, I did know something about it. When I initially took on the judiciary chairmanship, I had experienced what was happening on Mauna Kea.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked to include Hawaiian affairs as part of my portfolio, so that I could. There were a lot of concerns that Native Hawaiians had that I could not deal with, but those that I felt I could, I wanted to have the opportunity to leave my fingerprints on the concern.
Now that I see that, I mean, I remember when you asked to have Hawaiian affairs, and I was like, "Are you crazy? You had judiciary, and now you want Hawaiian affairs." But it worked out. I mean, it's really worked out this year.
Yeah, it has, and I was very fortunate to meet partners like Dr. Wong-Wilson to help guide me along my journey. Working to better the condition of the Native Hawaiians, and so I've been very fortunate.
So, Dr. Wong-Wilson, we talked a little bit about this, but House Resolution 33 gets dropped by the Speaker of the House. Did you have any idea about it, and when did you get the call?
No, I didn't have any idea that this was coming down the pike. I got a call actually from Speaker Saiki the night before he made his announcement on the floor of the House on the opening day session in 2021, calling for the Mauna Kea Working Group to be formed. He had called me the night before and just said, "I'm going to make an announcement tomorrow, so listen in." And I thought, okay, what a strange phone call.
We get a lot of strange phone calls, but you know what? That's sometimes how it works, I think, And when the call happens, what did you do?
Well, I watched it on TV the next day to see what he was all about. Called a few friends and said, "Watch TV. I don't know what's going on," but we did hear him and hear his speech and the announcement that he was forming a Mauna Kea Working Group. So it was quite a surprise to all of us, especially after having experience, the trauma and the emotion of being on the Mauna for about 9 months. I was part of the group that occupied the access road. And so I just want to mention that this coming Sunday is the 3rd anniversary of the arrest of the kupuna. So beginning this week, 3 years ago, was when this all began on the Mauna Kea access road. Certainly not the beginning of the conflict about the development on Mauna Kea, but for this chapter. It began 3 years ago. So a lot has happened in that 3 years. And here we are. So,
So one of the things, Mauna Kea was a watershed moment, I think, for all of Hawaii, and I think we were first confronted, I think, with a lot of things have been brewing and kind of under the surface, and then this happened. And I think this was really a watershed moment. So I will share with you that I think as we saw this resolution coming through, a lot of us were like, what is going to happen with this working group? And I think all of us were a little skeptical. And I can remember like, okay, we're going to get this resolution through. We just have to trust in this process. We have to trust in this working group. So we passed this, and this is in the middle of the pandemic. That's what people don't realize. You guys were doing this all via Zoom. So this resolution passes. We get out of session in 2021. Mark, tell me about how you first set up this working group and what were your thoughts bringing this diverse group together?
Well, I think on my part, there was some apprehension, knowing that there were parts of both sides of the story sitting at the table. Did leave me some sleepless nights. Not to mention the fact that I was coming off some health issues.
I want to put a point in this. I want to put a point in this and tell the world this, that the day of your first Mauna Kea working group meeting, I wanted to scold you and tell you, get off the phone because you were in the hospital. But you, the person that you are, you kept at it and you pulled that first group together, right? On the day that you were in the hospital, correct?
Yes, I was.
Well, we were so fortunate that you got through that. You convened this group. Dr. Wong-Wilson, from your point of view, I mean, you've come into this is a diverse group of people you don't really know. What was that first meeting like? What was those first couple of maybe weeks or months like?
Well, first of all, when I was asked if I was willing to participate in the working group, my answer was no, and it was no for the first few months, I think. I really didn't see how this was going to succeed, and I was concerned that although the House resolution was passed, House H.R. 33, that it didn't involve the Senate. And I kept asking that question, how is this going to work, and how do you foresee, even if something came out of the working group, that there's going to be success at the end, given that only the House set up this resolution and this working group. So I really was hesitant, and a number of us were very hesitant, and it took a lot of I think, repeated phone calls with Speaker Psyche and others, and I myself talked to a lot of community people, a lot of our kia'i, our protectors, who were committed to our movement on the Mauna. And I think the bottom line was that if we didn't make sure we had representation on this group and send people to be a part of this effort, that others would have to sit in our place, and then where would we be? We would still be outside the door without a voice. And so that was, I think, the turning point where we decided, okay, then let's get a group of us together and see if we can submit our names. And there was a process to names being submitted, and I have to acknowledge the community organizations, and especially the Hawaiian Civic Club Association, whose members really took this to heart and made several recommendations for people to sit on the group and on the Mauna Kea working group, and that was how it began.
So tell me, how many people were on the working group, and
we had 15 people on the working group. It was pretty evenly divided between those that supported the astronomy program and those that had concerns about astronomy and its impact on the Mauna. And we started off the discussion just kind of getting to know each other. And it was, I think there was some apprehension and concerns about how this group was going to work out. And fortunately, in the end, we were able to develop if not a real understanding, a respect for each other's positions. And moving that forward, we were able to come up with a recommendation for the House to take a look at.
So my understanding is that there was a lot of consensus building. You guys spent over a month or so just getting to know one another.
Right.
Dr. Wong-Wilson, can you speak to a little bit to that?
Sure, sure. And I think that's an important part of this to understand, because when 15 of us were put in our Zoom room together, we did most of this over Zoom, and many of us, a few of us knew each other, but many of us didn't know each other, or we only knew each other because we had been on opposite sides of the table, you know, through the discussions over years. We weren't given a guidebook, right? We weren't really
There
given.
was nothing predetermined.
No,
People
nothing.
thought it was predetermined. but
No,
there was nothing.
absolutely. They gave us a copy of the resolution and put us in a Zoom room and said, okay, your deadline is December. And this was in July. And so, you know, we thought we started with, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this, right? Well, we decided to first, before we could even get into significant discussion about any of the issues that are in front of us, we needed to get to know each other. And so we took the time to do that. And we really spent time over Zoom giving each other time to talk about ourselves and share who we were and where we were coming from and what we thought about the mountain, our personal connections to Mauna Kea. And that was followed by some really great work from Antipua Kanahele and other cultural practitioners on the committee that would, then we laid a foundation that we all discussed thoroughly and came to stand on, that we could agree as to the cultural foundation that is so important for those of us who are practitioners to believe why the Mauna is important to us. But we really went around the table and talked about how Mauna Kea was important to everybody and their own perspective. And it was only after that, which was nearly 2 months, nearly a third of the time that we spent together, before we could come to that place where we could start talking about the really hard issues. And I'm glad we took the time to do that, because then we were able to have these really hard discussions, but with a lot of respect for each other. And while it wasn't without emotion, there were some tearful moments, I think, for all of us through the process. I think we were able to at least come up with a full discussion about how we could form an entity, which was our charge, right? And stand up an authority or create an authority that would replace the current managers of Mauna Kea, of the summit area.
So the working group came up with significant management structure recommendations and management policy recommendations. Just mechanically, how did you guys determine what made it into the report and what didn't? Was there some kind of voting procedure or consensus rule that you guys came up with?
Yes. So one of the things that we agreed early on is that there would need to be a supermajority before anything made it into the report. And so that's, you know, about 10 people,
10 out of
10 out of
15.
15 in order to make it into the report. So you know, some of the more contentious things did not make it into the final report. However, a lot of things that did make it into the report did reach that supermajority requirement, and so that in itself, I think, built the trust among the group. Also, another thing that I had asked the group early on is that nobody go running to the media and just, you know, tell one side of the story. That before anybody went out, they would get agreement from all of the people to allow that to happen. And so, you know, that kind of got the media a little on edge. However, many of the people I spoke to were also respective of that decision to move forward in that manner. And so, yeah, there weren't very many leaks from the agency, from the group
From our
either.
group. Yeah, I think it was a matter of respect for each other and a confidentiality in that we would be able to bare our soul or to put all of our thoughts on the table, you know, and not feel that information would be taken out of context. And so there's a trust that was built up amongst us, and everyone kept that agreement in place. So that was good. And we tried to also honor the fact that the community had a right to know about what we were doing, and so we tried to balance that with periodic reports. And I know that was frustrating to some people, but that was the only way that we could see how we could actually tackle some of the really big issues and still be able to come out on the other end with a recommendation.
I think what you guys really speak to is about the deliberation that it takes, and that the space you need to really consider some different ideas potentially, but also to have those tough conversations. So what I would like to share with everybody is that the report, which was over 153 pages, is available on the House website, in addition to all of the summaries of your folks' meetings. And you had many meetings. So I think what I'd like to do in our last several minutes together, because this is a story that actually I think needs to be documented, because it's a different process, I think, in the sense that we ended up with a product that no one knew what we were going to have, but it was so thoughtful. And I guess for me, as an outsider to this working group process, one of the persuasive things that came out was I'm going to say it wrong, but the decadal study, where the National Science Foundation or the academies weighed in on this process. And what it told me was that Hawaii is a model for how we can collaborate. So, Dr. Wong-Wilson, I know you have a special story about that. Like, what was that all about? What was the connection with the National Science Foundation?
Right. So in 2020, in January, I believe, of 2020, the Astronomy Association had their annual meeting here in Waikiki at the Convention Center. And normally it's just a gathering of astronomers from around the world, and then they do their business. You know, they have an organization of all of the entities and the people who work for them, and they do their business. But because they were here in Hawaii, and because we were already occupying the Mauna Kea Access Road at that time, and the issue of the TMT development on Mauna Kea was really contentious, they made room for a few of us to come down from the mountain and to participate in their event in Waikiki. That, with a handful of our own native scientists from the University of Hawaii at Manoa mostly, who wrote papers that were submitted for the decadal study, the decadal survey as well. And then our few of us who participated in the workshops with astronomers talked about community engagement and how important it is, and a little bit about the history about Mauna Kea and why we were in this conflict. And so it was really the first time that the Astronomy Association opened their doors for a community group to come in like that. I believe out of all of that and the pressure that they felt in our community, as well as the good work that was done by our native scientists and our community members who attended, there was a section in the decadal report which was finally released this past year. And that decadal report section included recommendations about astronomy facilities, how necessary it is for them when they determine where to place themselves, how important it is that they understand the indigenous framework and have a place for the indigenous voice, because ultimately it's on some native land, you know. And so that is a new turn of events for the whole profession of astronomy, as the Decadal report.
So it gives me chicken skin because I looked at that as persuasion to pass this bill, and it made me feel comfortable to pass this bill. But I had chicken skin because what I said was that Hawaii can lead the world, and you folks were leading the world. You were showing and setting an example. I want to shift now, and I know we're going to run out a little bit of time, but let's go for maybe a few more minutes. The report comes out, you make recommendations about management structure, policy. Chair Nakashima, it gets to you now, and the legislative session, and you're right, the resolution wasn't a concurrent resolution. So give us a little bit of a taste of what it was like this past session to navigate this bill through both House and Senate. And I want to give a shout out to Chair David Tarnas, who was very instrumental in making sure that we could do this. Give us your insights as we wrap this segment up.
So as the bill went through the House, there were concerns because we know that the Water Land Chair on the other side had indicated that she was not interested in moving the measure. And I think that there was some discussion about that, and that if the bill was dead on arrival, then that it would mean eventual end of astronomy as we know it. And fortunately, the referral on the Senate side was somewhat of a surprise, but not unexpected, that Senator McConnell Kim was the one as chair of higher ed to be the lead on the measure. And it was very refreshing to work with Senator Kim on this level, because I've had other experiences with her when she was Senate President, and to see another side of her as we worked together was very refreshing, and really helped to drive the end result of the Mauna Kea bill.
And so there was, in fact, a lot of cooperation between House and Senate, and I think we really worked through this tough issue, and the community stayed involved throughout the whole process. Were you folks involved in the testimony as well?
Yes, I testified at every single hearing. It was really challenging from the community perspective, and it was exacerbated, of course, by the pandemic and the fact that we were still pretty much doing things from Zoom. And then I live on Hawaii Island, I live in Hilo, so I wasn't present on site for any of it. It was well, this is what I always say. I feel like I was thrown in one of those old washing machines, that go around like this, and then you get popped out at the end. And fortunately, the short story is the conference draft, which was a combination of both the House and the Senate conferees coming together and really working hard to come up with a draft that was something that we all felt comfortable with, right? I mean, of course, I don't think anybody got everything that they wanted, but we were really surprised from the community side at the end that the conference draft was not objectionable, right? Like we could live with it, and that there was a lot of work still to be done, but that it survived and has now become law. It's amazing.
So I really want to say, democracy is a work in progress, and I think this is really amazing. There's still a lot of work ahead, but I want to thank both of you, because I think you have both, and all of the members of the working group, and then the legislative leaders who really pushed this through, because I think it gives us a new path forward on something that was a watershed, cataclysmic moment in our history. So thank you both.
It was. Thank you.